Hi guys, and welcome back. Today we are going to have a fun studio day. I am going to be playing with watercolor swatches, mixing new paints together, seeing what I can come up with for myself, and it's just going to be a fun play with art supplies kind of a day, and it would be a great chance for you to get your own art supplies, play with those, get a hot drink, and we can hang out and talk and chat about things. I've been thinking about doing this for a couple of weeks now. I've just found that I don't know what happened. I don't know what did it, but I've completely fallen back in love with watercolors. Not that I stopped loving them, but they were very, my relationship with them became very mechanical. It was, I used it as a tool and I got to the end result and that was it. And I wasn't really fully enjoying and embracing watercolors. I haven't for a long time in the way that I could be. So when I got this desire to just play with really granulating paints and get more texture out of that, and I felt the need to pull out paints that I haven't touched in a long time and get to know those paints again, so I know how they handle and how I can use them in my work. I have felt so excited and inspired to work on my watercolors. It's a great feeling to feel ready to dive back into a medium and really just immerse myself in learning more about it. So I think this is a great idea if you yourself feel like you could learn a little bit more about a medium that you're using. I mean, honestly, I think that's probably all of us, every artist out there, but watercolors in particular, there's just something about how organic they can be and how they have a bit of a mind of their own. So they are the perfect candidate for being able to just dig in and see what the paints themselves want to do. So this is it's a fun way to just enjoy some time and play with some paints when you don't necessarily want to have to come up with a concept or a composition or draw. Sometimes you just want to play with some art stuff. So like I mentioned, there are a lot of paints that I own that I don't really touch very much or ever anymore. And the reason for that is there are paints that I am very comfortable with. I know how they behave. So like ultramarine blue tends to be the blue that I reach for every time. It's very translucent. It doesn't really rework a lot, and I'm able to glaze with it really nicely. It behaves in a way that I understand. And I have a lot of other blue colors that I got back in school that I picked up over the years, and I never fully immersed myself in learning how to use them. So when I do, once out of like all of this time, pull it out and try to use it in a piece, it doesn't behave the way that I expect or I'm used to. So then it throws the piece off, but really it doesn't mean that the paint is wrong. It just means that I need to understand how to handle it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to play with the paints that I already have so I can learn how to use them. One of the big things that I find that I struggle with is the opacity and the reworkability of paints. I find that when watercolors are more opaque, they tend to re-lift when you apply glazes on top, so that will get you a really patchy result sometimes. It can just disrupt the things you've already put down, and it can also create a really muddy look. But there's so many colors that are really beautiful, and I want to embrace that and figure out how can I use those in my pieces. So I know that one of the ways is there are certain areas in my paintings that I do glaze a lot, so I can avoid them in those areas. I can just make sure that I'm using ones that work well with that kind of a process. So like the skin, I add a lot of glazes so that I can get the shadows and the base color and the highlights. I can get those different variations in there. But on areas like clothing or the background, or wow, that sums up quite a bit. Or even hair, although I tend to lean a lot more towards glazing in hair too. But there are just a lot of areas, a lot of things that I could be painting that I don't need to glaze as much. I can rely on the paint creating the effect that I want and the color that I want within 1 or 2 washes at most. So that's part of it, is me understanding what paints can I glaze with, which ones do I prefer not to glaze with, and then once I get comfortable with that, I can remember, okay, well, I can play with this other different blue that I love, that's interesting, it's beautiful, it's really unique, and maybe it granulates, maybe it's really saturated. Whatever the case is, I can bring that out and use it in different areas of my piece and get a lot of joy and enjoyment from that, but then I don't feel like my whole piece is careening out of control because a very pivotal area is being disrupted. Yes, that's a good word for it. And I mentioned that I've been feeling so much more in love with paints lately. And I know this isn't the reason, but part of it too that's just making me feel really connected to it is I did just finish my tarot deck, which I know is, I talk about it all the time. It's very exciting, but I did all of those cards digitally, and over the process of working on those, it definitely helped solidify the feelings that I had about digital art, and that's that it provides a lot of value for me in a much smaller dose. So I still love creating digital pieces, but I don't want to rely on that to be the main area of my work ever again. So that was great. It was a tool that I needed to create this giant project. But moving forward, I think I'm going to really try my best to create projects that I can create using traditional mediums. And this isn't a condemnation in any way on digital art. I feel like I always have to throw this out there. I love digital art. I love creating it. I love looking at it. It's just that there is definitely less of a personal connection to it for me. I find that it gets a little taxing to stare at the screen. So anyways, after working on all of those cards, it was really nice to have the breaks that I put into my schedule where I could actually work on watercolor paintings, and it felt natural and right, and it got me hooked again. And since I am on the topic, very briefly, I've got to give a quick plug. The Kickstarter is live right now for my Lunar Lost Tarot deck. There's the link down in the description that'll take you over there. We have reached the funding goal, so it is definitely going to happen. We are working on getting the first stretch goal. We're really close. And the second one after that is the gilded edges for all of the cards. So anyways, I'm very excited about it. Thank you so much to everyone who supported it or is thinking about supporting it. It's been a dream of mine. So there is that link down in the description, but let's get back to talking about watercolor paints. One of the big things that I've had my eyes open to with watercolors is my desire to mix more paints together. So this is something that I've actually been pretty dedicatedly avoiding throughout most of my watercolor process. So I found that in the past when I've mixed a bunch of colors together, it can get really muddy. It makes it feel a lot more opaque and can feel chalky on the paper when I apply it. So I tend to rely more on glazing. So I'll mix the minimal amount of paints that I need, and then I'll layer and layer and layer until I get to the final result that I need, which works great for areas that you need it to feel really translucent or to have a really flat, smooth wash like skin or hair. But there are some really amazing effects you can get from mixing a lot of different paints. Those pigments intermingle, you'll get really granulating effects or just interesting textures, and you can see the way that those pigments can separate and blend together, and it's just really incredible, and I want to embrace that more. There are a lot of pre-mixed mixtures that are created by a lot of different watercolor companies. Daniel Smith is one of the big ones that does a lot of mixes like that. I use a lot of Mgram. They're my favorite brand for like that glazing process. They have a lot of really clean, simple colors. And that's my favorite go-to, but Daniel Smith, I've been buying a lot more of those lately. They have a lot of granulating ones and a lot of mixes, like I said. So one of my favorite mixes of all time with watercolors is Moonglow. It's Moonglow from Daniel Smith, but it's just so beautiful. It's like a smoky purple. It has kind of turquoise in it. It's very neutral, which is why I love it, because it's so interesting and complex and beautiful to look at. But in the larger grand scale of the paint, when you apply it, it is very neutral. So it works really well in creating more dynamic areas in a painting, but not letting it go overboard. I love it so much. One of the mixes from the beginning of this video is actually Moonglow and quinacridone gold. which is also from Daniel Smith. And that is actually one of my favorite mixes from this session. It just transported me to like a chill autumn morning. There's just something about that blend. I just thought it was so beautiful. And I think that that's one of the things that's most exciting about playing like this, is that seeing how these colors mix together, they are just evoking so much emotion and memory and senses for me. It's connecting a lot to different things that I love in my life, and being able to see that in this paint form and finding inspiration from just the paint itself for what I want to create. Like that mix, the moon glow and the quinacridone gold, that makes me want to paint a scene that I can have that autumn morning feel to it, and really rely on this mixture. And that feels amazing to be able to have this this spark of inspiration, and I can have it tied to the swatch, and I can put it on my wall, and I can think about it and think about a composition that goes well with it. And it's just so inspiring. I also tried creating little swatch cards that focused on one color. I think that this will be really fun and educational to do more of it in the future, so I can understand my paints better. So one of the ones that I did today, it was English ochre, I believe. I got this to widen the colors that I have for creating more realistic skin colors, so a little bit less saturated, but I wanted to try that out, so I got it. And I created a wash with just the paint itself, and then I created another wash that I used a few of the colors that I often glaze with to shadow my skin, and I applied that on top. And there were a few mixes that I did where I mixed it with like a couple of reds and quinacridone gold, just things that I often do when I'm painting skin, so that I could see how it actually behaves with the things that I tend to rely on. So having this little card will be really helpful for when I'm working on a full piece. I can shuffle through my swatch collection that I'll have eventually. I already have one now because I had this session, but I can pick through it and find mixtures and washes and glazes that fit with what I'm looking for, and then I can have the formula to figure out how to actually do it. So I think moving forward, I would love to do these little swatch educational cards for myself. There are so many different combinations, particularly combinations of paints that I would never think to put together, and they create really interesting results, or very dynamic grays, if you could say that, or neutrals that do fit the color palette that I'm using really well if I have a better understanding of the colors that I'm already using. So there's just a lot to be had from creating these little swatch cards like this, and they're really fun. They're really pleasant to look through. So I think this will be a nice way for me to get my creative muscles going if it's been a little while, or to just get my brain back into watercolors right before I start a painting. But that's about it for today. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me while we played with some watercolors. Like I mentioned, my Kickstarter is live right now, so I'm extremely grateful to everybody who's already supported it. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to the Gilded Edges. That would be the most amazing thing. That would be the perfect deck for me. But that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching. The link is down in the description to the Kickstarter, but that's it for today. So thank you guys. I'll see you next time.